And hustling is when you play your average game and you're betting against somebody who thinks they're going to play their best game. So they bet like they're going to play their best game, and you're betting like your average game, and that's how you end up winning, because best game is the best game for a reason. It's at the fringe of excellence. That's true in all of life. Like if you ask somebody how the future is going to be, most of them, a good portion of them, are always going to think it's going to be like the best it could ever be. And the reality is there's all sorts of life events that can totally interfere with that forward progress. Life is short. If you think about how long human beings have been on the planet, it's like a nanosecond in the grand scheme of timeline, right? But each of us has a very short life, and the question is, how do you want to live it? We all cause our own pain. We live in a country today that's divided for reasons that are just absolutely stupid. Everybody's like positional about stuff that doesn't really matter. That slows everybody's forward progress. For each one of us, you just have to decide like how you want to live your life. If you want to be a great person and you want to deal with great people, you can have a great life.
What's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Cash Flow Conversations. Today I have a phenomenal guest, Vince DiDona, a financial advisor who's been in the business for, I think, just under a century, something like 96.
A little over 44 years. It's been a while.
44 years. And I was looking you up online too. You have basically an alphabet of acronyms after your name.
Yeah, we could talk about how that happens to be, but yes, that is true.
Yes. And so what I'm so excited about having Vince here today is that Vince specialized in the business arena when it comes to financial planning. So not just your typical W-2 retiree who wants to retire at age 65 and golf every day, but the business owner that wants to be worth 10 or $100 million and then going through business exits, how to structure all of these things to maximize profits, minimize taxation, minimize risk, all of these conversations. So I'm excited to dive into a little bit of history of Vince and how he got such prestige in the industry by just focusing on a couple of things, and talk about some stories about his past, because in his past life, which Vince will talk about, so I don't want to speak for you, but prior to 2000, you had a reputation that I don't think you have today, which is cool to see. I don't know if you would have been on this podcast 25 years ago if podcasts existed.
Well, I don't think you would have liked me much prior to 2001.
Yeah.
You want me to talk about that a little bit right now?
First, let's talk about how you got started, because most of the business owners that listen to this, it's like the journey from W-2 to 1099. And I know a little bit about your background, but you got into the financial industry like right out of college, right?
Yeah. So the theory would have been that I should have been a doctor, right? So I went to Cornell University. I have a degree in biochemistry. But if you wanted to really know what I majored in, I was shooting pool. That's where I spent like the bulk of my days, like for real.
Never let college get in the way of your education. Firm believer.
Yeah. So, and actually, you learn an awful lot when you're playing 14 months straight pool with total strangers. Actually, there's a very important lesson in the world of nine ball that I'll share with you for a moment. So, how do mediocre players end up hustling good players? And it's an interesting question, though, right? Like, what is hustling actually? And hustling is when you play your average game and you're betting against somebody who thinks they're going to play their best game. So they bet like they're going to play their best game, and you're betting like your average game, and that's how you end up winning, because the best game is the best game for a reason. It's at the fringe of excellence.
Yeah.
But that's true in all of life. Like if you ask somebody how the future is going to be, most of them, a good portion of them, are always going to think it's going to be like the best it could ever be. And the reality is there's all sorts of life events that can totally interfere with that forward progress. And so if you think about the protection into the business that we're involved in, we actually handle those things that allow that future to occur. Like we take care of gray swan events. There's a lot to be learned shooting pool. So
that's definitely the first time I've ever heard that connection analogy of nine.
I have to justify the fact that I wasted college. But anyway, so clearly I was not going to be a doctor. And through a weird set of circumstances, I ended up in an insurance agency in New York, where I spent well over 43 years. But I think the connection to the degrees and stuff that I have after my name was like I was paying penance. Like I knew I was good enough to do well in college, but I spent my energies shooting pool and playing cards, um, and not attending class, which is a very hard way to get through college. And Cornell was the type of school where they wanted to throw you out if you didn't do well. So I was able to con my way into staying for a long time. But at the end of the day, I ended up in the business, and there's a few things about the way I deal with the business just in general. I remember in 1980, probably I was in the business for 3 months. The very beginning of 1980, I got a letter from NALU, the National Association of Life Underwriters, now called NAIFA. I didn't know what to do with it. So I went to my general agent. I said, what should I do with this? And he said, professionals join their professional associations. So I joined my professional association. And my history is involvement in all the professional associations in the industry. And I've actually been on the board of or president of a variety of different things. Like I was president of the New York chapter of the Society of Financial Services Professionals. I was the president of the Form 400. I will be completing my tenure on the board for FinSeca, which is the merger of ALU and Gamma. That was the original iteration of it. Now we're reunifying the profession, which I think is critically important. But so that's my world as far as it relates to professional associations and how I care for the industry and how the industry cares for me. But then and I do mean like penance. I realized there was something called the CLU, which was a certificate of and to indicate your commitment to the profession of life insurance sales. And I got that, and I got the CHFC at the same time, the Chartered Financial Consultant. That was 1983. Got my master's in financial services, Master's of Science in Financial Services in 86. And then the rest of the designations were all, let's call it, in line with how my career went. So as I started to move into working with business owners, it became more important to have the certified exit planner. And then as my clients aged, the retirement income certified professional was important. And my love, my primary love, if you Google me, I'm most associated with the estate planning business. And so the accredited estate planner was very important. And back in 2017, I was put into the National Association of Estate Planners and Counsels Hall of Fame, which is a pretty big deal, right? I mean, for the industry.
Nice.
I mean, the outside world goes, "There's a Hall of Fame for estate planning." Yeah, that really is. But
How do you get into that? Just by having a good track record?
it's a matter of, for many people, especially the attorneys, it's about writing. I'm not much of a writer, but I'm a good teacher. So I've written some things. I've been published in some articles, but the vast majority of it is like being a good actor in the space, promoting the profession, stuff like that. And then you have to have friends who are willing to nominate you.
Cool.
And then, then there's a selection process, which is not simple, but I ended up getting in there. And I think it's really awesome. I mean, there's a few things like that. So I'm proud of the NAPIC Hall of Fame. I'm in the Guardian Life Hall of Fame. There's a handful of people, maybe under 10, I think, in that. And then I also, in the inaugural issue of Forbes, the Shook Top 250 Advisors, I was number 10 in the financial security professionals. So those are things that I'm proud of, accomplishments.
Phenomenal, man. Yeah, I don't know. Some of the listeners might not recognize the clout that's around all of that, but I mean, how many financial advisors are there in the United States? Do you know?
That's a great question. Nobody really knows for sure, but we believe that the total number of people who are licensed in the life insurance space is about 400,000. And there are some people who would say that there's probably 250,000 that are really active in the space. There may be 1 million total financial advisors of all stripes in the United States. So there's a lot. I mean, there's a lot. And having some notoriety is kind of hard when you have that kind of number.
For
And you
sure.
get notoriety by doing good things, staying out of trouble, um, teaching advisors, and actually that leads to the other thing about being a hard ass, I guess. Prior to 2001, but I think that a lot of that reputation that I had was because I had an expectation that people were serious about. I mean, advisors were as serious about the business as I was, and it would drive me nuts that the people I was dealing with, because I do probably about 95% of my business activity comes from other advisors. I have a name recognition in the space, and if you had a client that needed help in the advanced estate planning area, you might bring me in, right? But I would marvel at the fact that advisors just weren't learning, what I thought was rudimentary knowledge. It was
Yeah.
just it drove me nuts. And so I think I was very critical of advisors, and I don't think I knew what a jerk I was back then. Like,
Yeah.
how do you know? Like, unless somebody like calls you out on it, but when you're really tough,
You
nobody
don't.
calls you out on it.
No.
It's like,
No.
because you could just pop them with a comment and they go home crying with the tail
Yeah.
between their legs.
So you were born with smarts and wit, uh, and drive. So when you got started, I've talked to Jess a little bit about this too. You decided I wanted to be the best at something. Like I want to be the go-to person for one topic or two topics, and that was the business and the estate side.
Yeah, I'd say.
So, and as a young person, that's kind of hard to do. That's a lot of research and whatnot. So the acronyms after your name, the certified life underwriter, all of that helped you get there. But talk to me about that. Those first few years, was it easy? I mean, back then, did you have
No,
your own clients?
it was horrible. It was horrible. The attrition in our industry is like 85% in 5 years. So if you make it, there's a saying that if you make it 5 years, you're going to retire in the profession, right? But it is really freaking hard to make it
Yeah.
5 years. And the reason why is because we're not organized around prospecting. Like, people sell us on the when you come into the business, you're sold on the wonders of the career. Like, you're on your boss, you can make all sorts of money, you can help people. Like, what could be better than that, right?
Right.
The funny thing, I like to say, it's like doctoring, except the patient doesn't die. It's like, you make a difference for people. But when you come into the business, the hard by the way, the other thing they tell you, which is a lie, which is it's the only business in the world you can come into and not spend $1 and you can make a lot of money.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. So
But a lot of financial planners don't treat their career like a business. They look at commission and fees as income, and then they don't plan a business around it.
110%. Now, so let's look at the two lies. The first lie is that the job is you have to source activity. And what happens for many people is they're given a list that they put 100 or 200 people that they know on that list. And then somebody who wasn't good enough to be in direct sales, became a manager, goes out and damages your relationship with 100 to 200 people. And then and by the way, at no point along the way have you learned to prospect.
Right.
And so by the time you're done destroying your relationships, you made a little bit of money, and then you discover there's no future for you and you leave. Yeah. So that's the job. Okay. Yeah. Now, coupled with that, there's one other piece that's really kind of important, which is, I don't know if this is a global phenomenon. It might very well be, but certainly in the United States, when you hear the word salesman, most people ascribe a bad connotation, right? Matter of fact, I teach agents all the time, 20, 30, 50 people in a room. And one of the experiments I did one time was I said, we're going to play word association. I'm going to point to you. I'm going to say a word, and I want you to say the first thing that comes to mind. I go, salesman, used car. I go, sales, dirty. Like, and I, after you do that for about 5 or 7 people, what everybody in the room realizes is that they're holding on to this feeling that sales is a bad thing.
Yeah.
Now the reality is that everybody in the United States is in sales.
Yep.
Right? Like everybody. But the connotation is it's bad. Now consider for a moment the dichotomy. You are in sales and you think sales is a bad activity. So what you end up becoming is a failure in sales.
Yeah.
Right? Which is sad, right? It is very now if you become present to that, if you start to understand that there's a little voice in your head that says sales is bad, so I'm just going to be a consultant, and then
euphemism.
Or I'm just going to teach my clients what to do, and they're magically going to take action. Well, guess what, fella? That's not the way it goes. You have to ask people to do things, but you have to ask them in a way that's enrolling. Like they go, okay, there's a future I'm painting for this client, and he sees it and he wants it. In order to do that, he has to take an action today. Like, okay, that's really what selling is, but the connotation kills people. So the failure rate in the industry is like off the charts. And truthfully, Matt, what else was I going to do? I worked very hard to play pool the way as good as I did, but there was no future in that for me. So I had to get good at what I was doing, and I knew I was smart. So it really just became a matter of like working in the business and learning what there was to learn to help the people that I was helping. Now, What did I do back in 1980? I came in September 1 of 1979. What did I do? In those days, there was an industrial directory in New York. I lived in New York. The industrial directory had to be like 1,000 pages, and it had by county, like so the boroughs in New York are counties, so Bronx, Queens, like that. And I called on people in the South Bronx, which were business owners, where nobody would go. It was you want to talk about bad areas, that the South Bronx was not good. Hunts Point, not good. And I would go and call on these people, and they'd go, if you want to come here, I'll talk to you. And I did business with those people, contractors and all that stuff. And I built a business talking to business owners that other people wouldn't talk to. But the thing that I had that you can't even get really today is I had a directory that had the name of the owner and the phone number. There's no email, obviously, right? But the phone number, and you'd call. Now, they didn't have voicemail. In New York now, if you were in a build, I used to cold canvas buildings. I'd start at the top, knock on every door, boom, 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 and get a business card and call them later. Not my idea of a good time, not at all. But it was necessary because if I wanted to be in the business, I had to feed the top of the funnel.
So glad you said top of the funnel too. It's the prospecting. So
you do what you got to do. If you want to be in the business, you have to do what you got to do.
Yeah. So you make it work, struggle through. The joke in the industry that I was always told is, first year you work with your family, second year you work with your friends, third year you better start learning how to meet some new people because they dries up. So when you started working with business owners and you found this niche inside of entrepreneur type stuff, what value were you bringing to them right away that they weren't already getting? What did you have that they weren't doing? Some of the conversations perhaps that you were having.
It's funny that if you talk to people who think they've got it together, they sound like they've got it together until you actually ask them questions. And then you discover that whatever they thought they had together, they don't really have together. So it could have been anything from, and by the way, if we're going back to the 1980s, the estate tax, the unified credit was a tiny number. So if you were worth $3 million, you had an estate tax you had to deal with, right? People always need life insurance. I wasn't really in the investment business when I started. I was in the life insurance business. So they had key man issues. They had estate planning issues. They just had survivor income issues. And even to this day, most business owners live on the income produced by their business and they kind of forget the fact that they are the business. Like most business owners fill every box in the org chart for the business. They work in the business, not on the business, and that's a whole world of value driving and creating additional value for the business owner, so he can exit gracefully and have the kind and quality of life that he wants to have. So, but in those days, I didn't know that. In those days, it was solving those unique problems that folks had. But in order to get them to understand that they needed something, you had to be able to have a conversation about the things that would face them, the gray swan events that would happen, right? Because when you think about building wealth, like everybody wants to build wealth, but the business owner is an interesting animal because 90% of their non-housing wealth is typically in the business. So business is the linchpin that holds everything together. So if they don't tend to the business, if they don't figure out a way to monetize the business in a buy sell, or if they don't figure out a way to get out of the business ultimately, like everybody leaves the business voluntarily, involuntarily, but everybody's out of their business eventually, right? Either you die, you sell, you become disabled, like any of those things. So, a planned life is a lot better than an unplanned life. So you have to be able to speak that. And I think I'm pretty good at having conversations with people where they go, well, something, I never thought of that, or I never thought of it that way. Like that's a better conversation. I never thought of it that way. And then you point to things and they go, okay, well, what do I do about that? And then you're off to the races.
So let's fast forward to the 90s. You start getting really good at what you're doing. Other advisors are bringing you in. What are some of the mistakes or themes that you would run into that would kind of set you off and make you think that this advisor is not taking it seriously?
Well, the first is that let's put it this way. In retrospect, I had an unfair expectation of the people that I was working with.
Great performers usually do.
Okay. Now, when you have somebody who's 30 years in the business and every year is like their first, that's a crazy making, right? And I run into that all the time, even today. But so it was unfair expectation, terrible. In retrospect, terrible, and it actually interfered with my forward motion, because if I had, it's like I had a business that were probably a third, up until 2001, a third of my business came from joint activity. After 2001, we'll talk about what happened in 2001. Literally 95% came from joint activity, right? I didn't see that how I was being was interfering with the possibility of getting new business. Like I was great with clients. I know clients don't know what they're doing, so, and so talking to clients and bringing them forward, easy peasy. But when I'm talking to an advisor, and they haven't learned, even though I work 3 cases with them, and it's the same case, and they hadn't learned anything by the third, it's like frustrating. It was frustrating for me.
Yeah.
But again, that was unfair. The other thing is something that really, even to this day, I have to be careful because it kind of gores my ox, as they say, is you have to know when to not talk on an appointment. Like if I ask a question of a client and I'm going to make it you for the moment, Matt, and you're a professional, so you wouldn't do this to me or to the client. But if you're sitting next to me and we're talking to the client and I'm the lead and I ask a question of the client, the only sound I want to hear next is the client telling me the answer to the question.
Yeah.
I don't need the advisor embellishing. Like I don't need any help. I know what I'm doing. I'm asking a question for a reason. I want that client to share with me what's going on for them. I don't want to hear something else. And if I have stories, not for this podcast and probably not for any publication ever, but I have stories where you would sit there and go, what were they thinking? Like, and so
one of my first, go ahead. What I was gonna say, one of my first meetings I had with a friend, and I had a seasoned advisor in there. The advisor would ask questions, and I did that. I would be joking in the background or answer the question. And when my friends left, the advisor sat me down and said, when I ask those questions, do you think I don't know the answer? And I said, well, I figured you did. He goes, you think I want to hear what the client has to say? And I was like, okay, point taken. I won't do that again.
Right. Well, you're brighter than the average bear. There are people who don't learn that lesson ever.
Yeah.
I
It
mean,
was sometimes you got to smack somebody upside the head to make them learn.
well, and so my reputation was built on the fact that advisors would talk to each other and go, Vince really knows his stuff, but he's dangerous. Now, I was never dangerous. Like the clients did what I asked them to do, because with clients, I was great. I know I was dealing in many cases with a blank slate, or I knew how to deal with them if they had a misinterpretation of the way the law worked or their circumstance worked. And then in 2001, in the third week of January 2001, I did the Landmark Forum, and I did it because I had a really bad circumstance in a joint business case where I blew up every relationship in the room because I was just out of my. It's a great story for another time, but it was just a bad thing. And one of the advisors said, this is this program. It's called the Landmark Forum, and this is what you might get out of it. And I said, that sounds really great. My wife would love to do that, but I think I'm not going to do that. And this woman had the brilliance to say, I have a great idea. It was like November. She says, did you get your wife anything for Christmas? I said, well, yeah, I got her tons of stuff. She goes, well, I have a great idea. Why don't you give her the Landmark Forum, and then you should do it too, so you have something to talk about. I said, what a great idea. Right? Mm-hmm. She was a good saleswoman.
Yeah, so, absolutely.
Yeah, so my wife at the time did it in the first week of January, and I did it in the third week of January. And in that session, now they weren't talking to me. There was a sharing at the mic between the Landmark Forum leader and the person at the mic. But I suddenly realized that everybody that I was working with was doing as well as they could. Like, I'm talking about the advisors. They were doing all that they could do, the best they could do. And here I was, like, beating people up for being who they are. And then for the next 2 years, I pretty much apologized to everybody that I did that to.
I was going to say, did you call that when you blew up that room? Did you talk to those people again and apologize?
Oh yeah. But mostly to advisors that I knew, like even people that I wasn't doing joint business with, who were like terrified of me. Wow. And all of a sudden, like literally between 2001 and 2003, my income tripled. Like bang. Because I got who I was being and I did something about it, and it transformed everything.
That's powerful.
It was, and I've done tons of work around that. Yeah, I think that somebody once said, and I don't remember who the quote comes from. It's an unexamined life isn't worth living. So what you get to do in the Landmark Forum, which is 3 days and an evening, is you get to look at your life. And then, and I put hundreds of advisors through the program, and all of them have had breakthroughs in relationship. Now, it's funny, Matt, where does transaction occur? Like if I'm working with you, you're my business owner client, where does it occur? Well, and I'm going to make the assertion that where it occurs is in relationship. So if I don't have a relationship with you, and I don't mean like, we go out to dinner and I wine and dine you. I mean, like, if you don't get that I get who you are as a person, and I show up as unlikable in any way, I may do some business, but it's not going to be what it could have been had we actually been in a relationship. And I don't mean, because a relationship can mean a lot of things to a lot of people, but if at the end of our business transaction, if I'm not a person who you would hang out with, not that we would, but if I don't show up as somebody that you could relate to in that way, I'm never going to be able to do business with you in the way I should, which means you're not going to get the help that you should.
Yeah. You might get a sale. 100%. You might get a sale and you might make more money than your friends and peers, but you're not reaching your full potential.
Right. Right.
You know, I've worked for a number of different agencies. Um, you can make good money, and you watch guys make good money. But I said this earlier too, and you kind of laughed at it. But the financial industry is pretty stuffy. It's pretty dry. It's a lot about numbers and charts and guessing. And I realized a long time ago, I am not going to do this just to make money. I want to have fun doing this. And I realized even recently in the last few years, I don't want to try and prospect or work with people that I wouldn't want to go hang out with. Not that I need to go grab a beer with somebody and go chill, but if I'm not relating to them, if I see a client and I'm going, how can you be, 65 years old and asking these questions for the first time, and then forcing me to convince you that, the way we're thinking is, I'm like, I'm just going to end it there. There's no reason, even I could get a sale, but I don't want to do that. I don't want to spend my days doing that. I have little kids. I'd rather go hang out with them than try and convince, somebody else.
Yes. It's funny. So this year I'm going to be 67 in June. And when I think about...
You don't look a day older than 65 though, Vince. You look
thank
great.
you. I appreciate that. I trimmed my beard for you today, so
looks good,
so I don't
man.
look scruffy.
Head's nice and shiny. It's perfect.
Yeah, I also shaved my head again. That's true. So so let's say you wanted to work with me on a case, and you were going to bring me in. Really, the first question I ask is, are they nice people?
Mm-hmm.
And they go, if they say, well, they're really, they're, nah, I go, you know what? Find somebody else to work. I want to work with people I like.
Kudos for you to figuring that out and putting it in action. It's one thing to talk about.
It only took 44 years. No, it took less than that, but.
You got it now. And quite honestly, dude, that's why I started the podcast. Because when I started when I had that epiphany a few years ago and I started working with business owners that think outside the box, that love their family, it's like these conversations are great. And I feel like if I would record them, other people would listen. I was sitting with a friend one time and I'm like, man, the last 30 minutes of us just chit-chatting, I think people would have listened to on a podcast. And so the podcast came from that, talking to clients and business owners about how they got to where they are and how they view money and growth and relationships.
Right. That's great. Yeah. Life, you think about it, life is short. We've actually, if you think about how long human beings have been on the planet, it's like a nanosecond in the grand scheme of timeline, right? Yeah. But each of us has a very short life. And the question is, how do you want to live it? Do you want to live it like we all cause our own pain? We live in a country today that's divided for reasons that are just absolutely stupid. It's just everybody's like positional about stuff that doesn't really matter. Mm-hmm. And that slows everybody's forward progress. But for each one of us, you just have to decide like how you want to live your life. If you want to be a great person and you want to deal with great people, you can have a great life.
Yeah. Let's talk about ways that you help business owners differently than a W-2 type employee. They have different concerns, different ways of thinking.
Sure.
You're a big proponent of life insurance.
Oh my God, yes, absolutely. But let's deal with the business owner circumstance first, okay? And then I'll talk about some other stuff. So I said it earlier. Every business owner has to recognize that they're going to leave their business someday. Either they leave it standing up or they leave it toes up, but they're leaving their business. Everybody. And as I said earlier, 90% of somebody's after-tax wealth is in the business. So there's an illusion for most business owners that because they're making a living now and having a great life and they got their boat and their house and kids went to college and all that things are great. But there's this thing that's going to confront them in the future that they have to face. So in the exit planning space, there are really two considerations. And I've just come to this in the last few months in talking about it. and I think this makes sense. There could be other considerations. I'm not saying that this is like the be all end all, but there's this component that we would call, how are you going to exit? In other words, are you going to do a third party sale, sell to a private equity firm, a competitor, guy down the block who wants to be in your business, like that.
Yeah.
And then there's this world of insider transfer, which is a transfer of the business to a co-shareholder, a key employee or key employee group, or a family member. Okay. So that's one component to this exit planning space. The other component is, what are you going to get for the business? And what you find when you look at all the things that business owners want to accomplish, their goals and dreams and aspirations and how they want to live their life, and you look at their resources, which can only be made up of two things. It's either their business resources or their personal resources. What you discover is there's always a gap. I mean, maybe 1 out of 25, there isn't a gap. But generally, there's a gap between what people want and what they have.
Yeah.
The balancing chip is the business, right? Because if 90% of your after-tax non-housing wealth is in the business, that's the balancing chip. So this whole other realm is this thing of value driving. Like, how do you increase the value of a business enterprise in such a way that it's sellable or transferable, like it has real transferable value? So I would tell you that if you were a business owner and you filled every box in the org chart, you can never get top dollar for the business, because basically you own a job, right? Now, does it cost money to have people in the boxes of the org chart? Yes. But what it does is it makes the business more valuable.
Sellable.
Yeah, right. There's this transferable. If you have, I have a client for many, many, many years. Their business is worth a few $100 million, but it would be worth way more, except for one important thing. They sell to two, well, probably 90% or 80% of their business is selling to two clients. Concentration risk. Yeah. And the way I could describe this to you is, and I work with a few people that actually do this, but imagine that you manufacture a product and Walmart is your biggest client. So your happiest day is that your Walmart is your biggest client. Most unhappy day is that Walmart's your biggest client, right? Because Walmart can tell you where you're buying your corrugated cardboard for your packaging, right? So, and by the way, if they go bye-bye, there's 90% of your revenue gone. Yeah. Right? So if I put it in those terms, it's very easy to see. So that actually diminishes value. So value driving might be working on programs to increase the number of clients that you sell. It could be a big one. You have key employees. You want to see the quickest way to wreck your business? Let your key employee hijack your sale when you're going to sell the business. Yeah. Like I walk in, like you're my key employee, Matt. I go, hey, I got great news. I'm 66 years old. I'm going to sell my business. And I want to thank you for being a great employee for all these years. And then you say to me, well, what about me? I go, what do you mean, what about you? You go, well, I want $1 million. And I go, well, no. He says, well, I'm out of here. Now, if you work for me, my value is as an owner of business, my business value is contingent on the key people. So I have to make sure I attract and retain and reward my key people in a way that allows them not to hijack my transaction ultimately. So all these pieces are part of that value driving component. They're not directly associated with the sale, but they affect the outcome in dollars or in money or money's worth, right? So that's really important. Now, that, by the way, that's why every business owner, like every one of them, has to have a conversation about what the probable, almost certain future is based on the path they've already taken. Like, what's it going to look like down the road? They have to have an assessment of that, so that way they can say, well, either I'm going to be okay with the way it is, and my family will suffer, or I'll suffer ultimately, or I'm going to die in the saddle, which is a possibility, or they're going to say, well, I obviously have to do something about that. And that's where an engagement in that arena comes in, right? And, the exit planning business is a fee-based business, a lot of work. But if you think about it, if you had $5 million in an investment account, there's somebody who's managing it that you're paying them. Yeah. And you're probably paying them somewhere between 50 basis points and 100 basis points. That's like real money. And here's a business that's worth $5 million, and you're paying nobody to. There's a difference between running the business and managing the outcome of having a business. Does that make sense?
Yes, I've never heard it put that way, but it's
I just made that up for the first time today.
That's good. We'll mark that and make sure we come back to it. That was good.
Okay, now
there's another tagline for your book.
I like it. So now there's another piece to all this, right? How do people lose wealth in the United States? Like, what are the things that just steal wealth from people? Well, one could say mismanagement, right? One could say that. But there's a whole lot of things you can't control about that. But the other exposures are divorce, lawsuit, and the estate tax, or transfer taxes in general, which is gift tax, estate tax, and generation skipping tax. So my argument is that you want, to the extent possible, you want to protect what you have against the predators that would steal your wealth. And that's the whole realm of estate planning. So while for many people, estate planning is a thought that they have added to all their other thoughts, because of my extensive experience in estate planning, I think estate planning is this overarching umbrella inside of which everything else should exist.
So when you say estate planning, does that includes businesses, families? At what level should someone start consider estate planning?
Everybody has to think about estate planning. If you have money, okay. If you have no money, then you're in the estate creation game, which is purely a life insurance game, right? Like, you have to create an estate. Now, life insurance is important in all circumstances. Like, I have yet, in 44 years and 4 months, which is about how long I've been in the business, I have yet to find a circumstance where life insurance doesn't make a difference, like in a positive way, right?
Yeah.
So for the people who are not as of yet wealthy, life insurance creates that wealth to perpetuate the income that you've produced and stuff like that, right? Because here's the reality: because there was a day when I was 30 years old and I didn't have much, and I was married and I had a kid, right, my first child, and if my heart stopped, their futures would end. Like, they would never have, but for the fact that I was not living, if I were alive, they would have had a lot. And if I stopped living, they wouldn't have had anything. So assuming that there are people you care about and love, you do something about that. And life insurance is the only solution. Now, the need for life insurance may change over time, but I have yet to find a circumstance where life insurance does not matter throughout an entire lifetime until death. So where I spend the bulk of my time is in permanent life insurance, right? Term insurance is the permission slip to go and get permanent insurance if the cash flow is not there early, right? So life insurance has that effect. Now, once you move into the wealth area and the business owner area, we're dealing with different considerations. We could still be dealing with family income issues, but different considerations. So life insurance is a perfect tool to pay an estate tax. Life insurance is a perfect tool to fund buy-sell agreements. Life insurance is an awesome tool to fund executive benefits, and all that. And then positioning that, and so positioning that inside this context of thinking about trusts and ownership of businesses and making sure they're protected from those predators that would otherwise take your wealth away, that's a big deal. And when a business owner hears a narrative that makes sense, they go, okay, I want that. Now, how do I make that happen? And I think I'm expert at delivering that type of narrative, which is why people bring me in to do joint business. And I move very fast with people. I mean, like, I don't I don't take people down rabbit holes. I don't, you know, branch off of paths. There are things that people have to take care of. And quite honestly, if I can't make a compelling and seductive argument for what people should do, shame on me. I've been doing this for a long time.
What about a business owner that's doing very well? Over 10 million a year of gross revenue in their company, bringing in over $1 million of income, but they don't have a family. They're not married yet. They don't have any kids yet. Um, do they have an estate issue? Is life insurance a thing for them? Like, what do you think about that?
Well, the first question I would ask, and sometimes I do this with clients, I try to avoid it because it's kind of like snarky, which is, are you telling me that's a permanent condition? Like, you're telling me like your singleness is a permanent condition? No, no, no. I plan on having a family one day. Oh, okay. Got it. Right. Like, so, I'm going to say this. You could take this to the bank. You're never planning for the person who's sitting in front of you in the moment they're sitting in front of you. You're planning for the future that they're going to be. Does that make sense? Like, Matt, you're a young guy. You're a bunch younger than me.
Yeah.
And I could talk to you about the things that are hitting your life right now. And I could plan for those things. But that's not as good or as all encompassing as planning for the guy who you're gonna be. Because the probable, almost certain future is that you're gonna be that guy.
Yeah.
And then you have all these other considerations that you have to deal with.
Yeah.
So I want to address most of what those things are going to be now, because I want you to live powerfully into the future. And if we do that well, your present is taken care of.
If we take care of your future self well, today is taken care of. And in the business owner, they crush it in the day to day. So that kind of resonates with them too, is that they know that they're going to make today the best they can possible.
Yeah. So this is one of the things I teach. It's lost on some people, but I think this is good for this conversation. There are two types of concerns. There are concerns that people have, and there are concerns that people are. So what's a concern that somebody has? I meet somebody who's 45 years old, they got young kids. I have a concern, I have to pay for college. So that's the thing that's emergent. It's right in front of their face. It's the thing that they want to have handled now. Okay? Now, what's a concern that they are? Like, part of being human is you're going to probability is you're going to live a long life. You have to have assets designed to be able to carry you when you're no longer willing to, or no longer able to do what you were doing in your younger career. So everybody on the planet has to make choices about what that future looks like. But that's fundamental to being human. So, and there's others, but I'm giving you two simple examples. Now, if I do a good job of taking care of that future, that all the fundamental things that, Matt Love is, I will have taken care of the funding of college education. Right? So I have to have a bigger, so when I work with a business owner, if they're young and they're killing it, and they don't have a wife and kids, then they still have to deal with the estate tax problem because the assets are going to go somewhere. Yeah. They could still lose them for lawsuit. They could still lose them for palimony if they're not going to get married. They could still lose them for an estate tax if it's going to somebody. And maybe it goes to charity, and that's cool. But I'd rather somebody plan for, I want them to get to that future with some degree of certainty.
That's really good. The concern that people have and the concern that people are. And so often people are just concerned with like the next issue, and they just want to put a Band-Aid on the next issue. When if they just zoom out a little, they can take care of it all at once.
Yeah. And the idea is not to trade one for the other. You want to try to get all of it handled. But going back to that case you just described, if I have a young guy or gal who's got a business and they're killing it. Well, they're not killing it because they're sitting there alone. They have key people that they have to take care of. So there's they still have to deal with that, right? And I have a case I'm working on. I actually have a situation. The guy's not married, guy has no kids, and his business looks like it may end up being sold for close to $100 million. So what does he need life insurance for? Well, it turns out when you question him, he's got nieces and nephews that he cares about. He's got siblings that are not nearly as successful as he is, that he helps along the way periodically. So we're preserving value for somebody. Now that's one thing. Now here's the other piece, which is really, and I have a great story associated with this. Actually, I'll tell this story and then you'll see the punchline.
Yeah.
So I'm working on a case, and it's out west in New Mexico. And I was brought in by an advisor from Texas, and we're working on this case. And one of my claims to fame is that when I engineer an estate plan, I engineer it so that way we're literally going to wipe out the estate tax, preserve value, income, and control. But it says some structures you could do in order to engineer that. And in this particular case, I had put this client into underwriting for something like $30 million of life insurance. I brought in the attorneys. The attorneys did their job, and the life insurance was approved. Now, part of the story is the owner of the business owned 95%, and his CFO owned 5%. And I wasn't flying out to finish off this case. I was in New York at the time, and I was using GoToMeeting. And the co-advisor was in the room. Now, he's an experienced guy, so this was not somebody I had to be overly worried about. This goes back, this case is probably like 2004.
Yeah, you mentioned GoToMeeting. That's an ancient software.
Yeah. But I was doing remote meetings with GoToMeeting like forever.
Yeah.
So we're having this final meeting to finish off getting the life insurance handled. The estate plan was done. And so in the room is the client, the 95% owner, the CFO, the 5% owner, the other advisor, and I'm in New York, and I'm talking about the plan and what they should do. And the client's going, I get that. And the CFO goes, if anything happens to him, you've already eliminated the estate tax in 5-7 years, it'll be gone. And this was like a serious sized business. Like this was not a small business. And actually it was probably 7 businesses that they had. They were all interrelated. That's part of the story. So the CFO goes, so, if something happens to him, I'll be able to take care of the business. So we don't need that life insurance. And I'm dead quiet. And thank goodness the other advisor is dead quiet, although I could only imagine that the sweat is like beading up on his head, right? Dead quiet. Honestly, Matt, I don't even know how long I didn't say a word. And then suddenly the 95% shareholder goes, I'll send you a check tomorrow. How much do you want?
Wow. Silence is loud.
Yeah, and the reason why is because the business owner was really clear that there was no way. Actually, I left out a little piece of the story. So I actually said this. I said, you're right. There's no need for the estate tax stuff. But if you think about it, you have 7 businesses. They're all interrelated. Big guy has relationships with all the banks. And if he dies, there's a spaghetti bowl of stuff that's going to all fall apart. And that's what I messed up the story. And that's when the other guy said, oh, no, I'll take care of it. And the main guy goes, I'll write you a check tomorrow. Mm-mm. Which basically was a slap in the face to the 5% shareholder who thought he was going to be able to hold it all together. Meanwhile, the guy's wife had never stepped in the building. She couldn't find the ladies' room if she tried. He told us early on he thinks his kids are wastrels and they need to understand about money, and they could never run a business if they tried, right? And he's got these 7 interlocking companies. Like, there's no way. Yeah. So that's a consideration that most see. You know what? And this actually goes back to the first part of our conversation, where like I'm sitting there as a guy who's really smart, who knows the business well, being grossly disappointed that there are other people who should know the business who don't, right? And
As a
so
CFO,
when you, excuse me,
as a CFO too.
yeah, no, but so when you're talking to a business owner, they don't understand what's holding everything together. In large part, is the guy who's sitting in that seat. They think that the world is going to work anyway when they're not, and that ain't the way it is.
No. Wow, man. You probably have a ton of stories like that.
You have no idea.
That would be a whole fun conversation, just telling stories about business owners and from the mistakes that you've seen them made to the good decisions that they've made.
Early in my career, I was slapped in the face with a situation. I had a contractor, sheet metal contractor, who was probably the second largest sheet metal contractor in New York. They had done some of the work in the World Trade Center when it was originally built, so a big company, and they had 3 shareholders. And I put life insurance in for a buy sell that never got written. And there was one shareholder who happened to not believe in doctoring. He thought chiropractic was like the world, like I get adjusted and like cure cancer. Well, guess what? He got cancer and he died. Mm. And at the time, the company was probably worth, this was the mid 80s, I guess. The company was probably worth $20 million. 21, let's make it 21 million because the math is easy. So his interest should have been 7 million. And what I know happened, although they try to keep me from knowing this, was that guy who died, his wife got $1 million. That was it.
Should she have taken legal action?
I think she didn't have a leg to stand on. They had control the accountant. There was, every business has bonding and debt and all that sort of stuff. And they told the story, and she was like a regular person. Not for me to get involved in that, but she walked away with $1 million. Some of which was actually considered loan repayment that the business owners had made to the business. It was terrible, but that's because I's weren't dotted and T's weren't crossed.
And that's got to be the fuel for the fire too. When you see these other advisors and clients. Not that they don't know what the right move is, but like if they see the right move and then choose not to take it, like that's where a lot of that fire has to come from too, where you've seen it go the other way.
Yeah, but the thing is, Matt, you can't. What I've learned over the years is no matter how hard I try, I can't make you lift your right arm from here. Like I have no say over what you choose to do. The only thing I can do is make the most compelling argument for what you should do. And if I do a good enough job, you'll take that action. I can't force you to do anything. I can merely advise. And I have exceptionally long career and a lot of experience. And I'm very good at crafting narratives where people go, that makes sense to me. How do we engage and how do we get this to happen?
I love it. Okay. There's a couple of questions and points I want to make sure we talk on before we end this.
Sure.
You have not talked much about the value of different securities for business owners. You haven't talked about retirement plans or Wall Street's value for business owners. And the complaint that happens online is there a reason for that?
No, we hadn't gotten to it yet. I'm following you, my friend.
So talk to me about that.
I could do 2 days. We could have a great time together. So
I know we probably should do it because we're already in it on an hour. I feel like we could do it. We could totally do this again. Maybe next time we talk more about the market stuff. But because we've talked about life insurance, let's keep it on that then today. Because the challenge that life insurance at the consumer level and on social media, you have a lot of people out there that say life insurance, not only is it whole life insurance, is not only expensive, the commissions are through the roof.
Yeah.
And if you can,
So
and
people can say whatever they want, and quite frankly, for the value that's produced, commissions should be higher. I mean, like what we do is critically important to people. Now, it's funny though. When you let's say you bought a car and you bought it on time. Okay, so you bought a $50,000 car and you bought it over a 4-year period of time. So you're paying interest and principal. Now the question you have to ask, and you did dealer financing. So the
yeah,
question you have to ask is, where did they make the money? Did they make it on the sale of the car, or did they make it on the financing? And if you actually look at the data shows that they made all the money on the financing, but you don't care about that. You wanted the car, right? So the conversation about commissions is stupid. It's just stupid, right?
can we talk about the DOJ?
We could. Matter of fact, because of my work with Finseca, we're trying to delay the fiduciary rule because there's a belief by the embedded laborers. I don't even know what my
Vince trying to
experience
play
is
politics right now.
my experience. So I went to Congress 2 weeks ago. I talked to the staff of 4 senators and one my local congressman, right? So because we came in as a task force to go and do this, I was literally in Washington Monday and Tuesday of last week, right? And my sense now, this is not a congressional thing. This is the DOL, right? So DOL is part of the executive branch, and you know that Biden has called commissions junk fees, like it's a problem. And I'm going to talk about the difference between fees and commissions in a minute. But every person I talked to thought the DOL was overreaching, and that consumer choice is far more important than the fiduciary standard, especially since we're all subject to best interest standards anyway, right? So we want, and by the way, since the last time the DOL failed to get this through, a whole bunch of people were hurt during the 2.5 years or 2 years that their last rule was in place. 10 million people supposedly, according to I think it was a Deloitte study that was done. But a whole lot's changed between, was it 2017 and now? So there's best interest standards. There's the NAIC annuity stuff. So DOL is trying to jam something through without studying it, and so we're asking Congress to have them slow down and redo a study, because what they may find is that it's fine.
And so what they're trying to do is get rid of commissions versus fees, right? Is that
Yes,
sum it up?
but let me distinguish that for you. You and I get paid differently for different efforts. So what a commission, the products that have commissions are protection products typically. Annuities, life insurance, disability insurance, long-term care.
Yeah.
Commissions are paid, and they're important because those who earn commissions are performing the anti-procrastination function. And the reality is, if we didn't get commissions, we wouldn't make any efforts in that area, and people would go uncovered. And the evidence of that is England. In England, commissions are not allowed. The moment they put that in, I believe cover, as they call it, in protection, dropped by 75%, and the industry shrank by 25%. Because, the lift to have people understand why they need life insurance is so great. Let's just invest the money and call it a day, if compensation is the same. And so people end up with less life insurance, right? Fees. So again, commissions are about the anti-procrastination function. Fees are about expectation management. So if you have an investment portfolio and I'm charging you a recurring fee, my job actually is not money management. It's love management.
Yeah.
My job is to have you behave, because when you misbehave, you end up poor. So I have to have a long-term relationship. Now, interestingly, where there are products where you have a choice of commissions or fees, people actually pay less money when they pay a commission than when they pay fees. That's just
Say
a
that
math
again,
problem.
please, just for the listener.
Yeah, sure. So if you have two products, let's call it an investment product where you have a choice of paying a commission, where you have a choice of paying a fee, an ongoing fee. Commissions actually cost less than fees because you're done, and then fees go on forever.
Mm.
So the present value of the fees is way more than the upfront commission.
What if they're actively trading with a commission base?
Well, you shouldn't be doing that.
There you go.
That's like
That's
that's
simple.
like goof. That's like goofy. It doesn't. There's literally no evidence that works. There's no academic evidence that it works.
Really.
So that's a whole other day that we
Yeah.
could talk about that. But
Vince, what I like talking with you for is that you really simplify complex topics. Estate planning, it's almost like the medical world where you have to go to school and don't worry about that. We have professionals that handle it. Let us take care of it. Like where it's like this untouchable thing. And when talking to you, you can kind of simplify some of the ideas. Here's why we do make those decisions. And it makes so much more sense. Like I used to be an architect. That's a Lego that my wife got me. That house is the Farnsworth house in Illinois. It was praised for its simplicity. Simplicity is not easy.
that's right.
Just because it looks simple doesn't mean that it was easy. From the beam size to the materials used to this, like to everything about that was thought of. So I love the fact that you can take this complex topic like estate planning and make it digestible for people who might not even realize that they should even start considering this. Business owners can be so concerned with just making money and taking care of the fam. And this is the thing I think technology, I'm going to give a pitch here for like social media and technology. The part that's not fun in this industry is prospecting and trying to get people interested in how we help clients, right? Telling someone, hey, you have a problem, you haven't looked at it yet. No one's receptive to that, right? People don't even like going to the dentist, and they know they should go to the dentist.
Right.
Until your tooth hurts enough, you're not going to go say, get in trouble like you didn't floss. And what social media allows, and what I hope this podcast can help people understand is, for the people that do want the help, these are the questions you just have to learn how to ask. And so if this can reach a large audience, they can click a couple of links and then learn directly from you. So thank you for doing this today. I think we should do it again and get into
I have a lot more things to say. So I love the bully pulpit. So it's good.
I love it, man. Well, we'll put some links, and we didn't get a chance to talk about this really quick. Watching you speak, one of the biggest issues, the first issues to help people tackle is the idea of people make money and then they live their lifestyle. Then they have forced savings rather than make money and save and invest and then pay yourself a salary or a income stream that's fixed and allowing 100%. Your wealth to build. Talk about that for 3 more minutes before I let you go.
Okay. So, yes. So a partner of mine, Dave Mozica, and I own a company called Currents. Currents is a fintech company, financial technology company. And what we've done is we've cracked the code on increasing savings rates. And if you go on Google Play or the App Store, right, and you put in budgeting or financial planning, you'll find like anywhere between 50 and 100 different applications on like how to get that done. But if you go to the Fed website, which is the Federal Reserve of St. Louis, and you put in savings rates, you'll discover that the national savings rate is 4% of gross income. Like America does not save. That's 4%. By the way, that means, Walmart greeter, like, in retirement, if you're lucky. And I don't think Walmart has greeters anymore. So
times are tough.
And by the way, all those applications disenfranchise the human advisor. That's like little millennials running around going, these are the people who are saying fees are better than commissions. And by the way, human advisors are unnecessary. And the reality, like I've been looking at this for 44 years, I will tell you that nothing happens without a human advisor. right? Like nothing great happens without a human. You need somebody. I need to have a relationship with you so you could hear my voice and understand. I don't know if AI will ever be able to do that, although I do worry about things like, Skynet and Matrix and stuff. But like I honestly believe that you can't disenfranchise the human advisor. So our technology platform helps the human advisor deal with the savings issue for clients. And I will tell you this, Matt, you may not believe it, but members, we call the consumer end of the business, like we call people like you strategists, and then the people who you work with members. Members are saving an average of over 30% of after-tax cash flow.
Mm.
Like not 4% of gross income, but 30% of after-tax cash flow. And we have all the evidence for that, and we know it's happening. And the human advisors then have an opportunity to help people figure out how to deploy that money. And it goes into protection products, it goes into investment products, but it helps people create a future that's extraordinary.
And
And
it's just an app.
well, it would be unfair to say that it's just an app. It's actually the personification, let's say, of a structure that Dave had been doing for 15 years before we built the technology to allow him to scale and to allow it to be transferable to other advisors. So it's the actual structure of how you arrange your cash flow with your insight as the advisor into the circumstance. That way you really help people move the needle.
Yeah. I think
Because Dave was doing it manually. I'm telling you, Dave was doing it manually and producing amazing results. He just couldn't scale.
And so now at the consumer level, they can do it on their phone, all FDIC insured, using banks, where teaching them how to save, like you said, 30% of what they're making instead of.
Well, it ends up being that. Like I could do a demonstration where I could show you that they could start with nothing. And remember, they have pay raises over time. But if you could put a little speed bump on their consumption, the gap widens over time. It gets wider and wider and wider. And you end up with people actually being able to have a life in the future.
I love it. All right. We're going to do another episode on just Currents, because I think that's such a valuable product that came to market here fairly recently. It's proven for decades, but it's now so accessible for the consumer. I think they want to learn more about that. So we'll have a link in the description below if they want to learn. If they can't wait till the next episode, go ahead and click the link in the description and learn about Currents, and stay tuned. But Vince, it was great having you on here, dude. You want to do this again?
It was a true pleasure, and I can't wait to do it again. It's fun.
Brother, and I can't wait to be on your podcast when you finally get that going, when your book comes out and all those great things that you're going to be doing here in the next few years.
Thank you.
All right. See you, Vince.